All right, everyone. I'm going to get us started. Hello, my name is Simon. My pronouns are he and him. I work on the Ashoka team. I'm joining you all from Wisconsin and the traditional lands of the Ho-Chunk people. This is Inside Ashoka. Thank you all for joining. Occurring roughly once a month, Inside Ashoka is a chance for our community to get to know Ashoka and its fellows. Typically, we meet one fellow over 30 minutes. Today, we are going to squeeze in 4 newly elected and really exciting social entrepreneurs in 45 minutes. So we have a lot of ground to cover, and we're going to jump right in. But first, just 2 quick things. One is on the format. Because we have these 4, I'll be bringing in each one at a time with some questions. We'll have a quick discussion, and there will be a chance for questions from the audience. So if you have a question, use the chat or the Q&A tab, I suppose, to share that, and we'll try to get to some of those before we wrap up today. The other thing I want to do is acknowledge and appreciate all of you for joining. We're connecting today amidst a global pandemic that has heightened a sense of divide and fear. It has had an economic impact on many people. It's also claimed hundreds of thousands of lives. And all of this has disproportionately affected Black, Indigenous, and people of color. We also connect during a moment of upheaval and reckoning with a legacy of anti-Black racism and injustice in this country. And we at Ashoka stand with our community of social entrepreneurs who've long tackled all kinds of injustices, as well as young people, old people, community members all around the world who stand up to justice and fight for equality. So we're really encouraged by the folks here today who do all those things and are going to be sharing with you a bit about their work. So thank you all for joining. Thank you, Priti, Stephen, Ronnie, and Eric in advance for sharing your stories. We're going to jump right in. And we are going to start with Priti. Priti leads IMAC. She joins us from Oakland. I'm going to let her say a little bit about her work. And with the theme of deep fixes, I want to I want to acknowledge the fact that from afar, your work looks like it addresses drug affordability, drug prices, right? But you don't work with pharmacies or with consumers. You go deeper. So tell us, I guess it's where and why, right? So Priti, I'd love to hear from you.
That's right. And, you know, Simon, your words are really touching me right now, because I think they speak to the heart of why we do this work. So many people live today without access to medicines across so many diseases. And we are in the middle of a pandemic, and we're all waiting for a cure or a vaccine. And I think, you know, in some ways there's this assumption that once a treatment or vaccine emerges, that everyone's going to get it. And it's just not true. You know, history shows that it's not true. Some people are going to get it first. Some people are not going to get it at all. And that's really the heart of the problem that we as the Access to Medicines movement try to solve. My organization, IMAC, focuses on, when you look across the access to medicine system, we focus on the patent system. It's really it's the root source of power for where ownership rights and monopoly power is derived. And in our experience, when you look across the whole access to medicine system, it's a really serious bottleneck for why medicines don't actually get to people. So what we're doing right now is we have a blueprint for how to transform, completely reimagine the patent system so it actually works for people and ensures that we can save as many lives as possible.
Priti, say one more line about this work, right? Because we're with you. It's urgent, and we as as Ashoka have endorsed the fact that we think we're going to get there. But something you've shared during the COVID moment, we've signaled that it's actually taxpayers that are funding the R&D for society, right? For work that's going to be ultimately the work that'll benefit most. How is it, right? Like that we're not there yet, right? How do you help us get to the point where this work actually benefits everyone.
Absolutely. And so I think what you're raising about public investment is so important, because what we're seeing is that we're basically, as the public, paying twice. We're investing through taxpayer dollars in research and development, and then we're being asked to pay again. And as drug prices go up and up and up, all over the world, but particularly in high-income countries, we're seeing that we're essentially paying twice. And it's holding drugs out of reach for a lot of people. So our blueprint is called RAISE. It stands for Raise the Bar, Amend the Incentives, Increase Public Participation, Stand for Justice, and Expand Oversight. And through this set of 5 things, we're asking that each component of the patent system, which decides which diseases get invested in, who gets access to the things that are invented, and how we're asked to pay for them ultimately, just gets transformed to actually catch up with the century that we're living in and make sure that medicines are reaching people.
Thank you, Priti. We're going to pull you back into the conversation in a minute, but first we're going to invite Eric to join. Eric Liu leads Citizen University. He joins us from Seattle. Eric, you've shared that the United States is at risk of being the kind of place where we have a pretty constitution, but an atrophy culture. I'd love for you to tell us, is it a risk, or are we there, right? What's the state of American democracy, and how are folks to engage?
Well, thanks, Simon, and thanks to the entire Ashoka community and family for welcoming us into the fold. This is really exciting, and I look forward to just thinking of this as the start of a lot of conversations. Our work at Citizen University is fundamentally about trying to foster a culture of powerful, responsible citizenship. And we think about that in particular as the work of spreading a belief that strong democracy requires strong citizens, and that we all have the power to make change happen, but also the responsibility to try, right? And what you can boil all of that down to is a question of civic faith. Not so much do we believe in democracy, but is our democracy worth believing in? And I think the question that you've posed really gets at the heart of it. I think, this is not an abstract question. Just walk down the street in your town or turn on the news, and you see in ways that are both incredibly dismaying and somewhat heartening the good, the bad, and the ugly of our democracy in the United States on vivid display. I don't think it needs to be overstated, the bad and the ugly, the ways in which the pretty words of our Constitution have from the beginning been subverted and intentionally disregarded by structures and institutions, not only of anti-Black racism, but of kind of a multi-generational concentration of voice, clout, wealth, and power toward a very few. And that plays out in terms of race, it plays out in terms of class from the beginning of our country's history. And at the same time, we see right around us right now in these times the possibility that people can change and re-rig and rewrite those rules and that frame of the possible in our system. And I think if you told any of us a month or two ago that the range of institutions, celebrities, political leaders, faith leaders, corporate CEOs that have since avowed that Black Lives Matter and have since committed to putting their institutional and personal kinds of capital behind the idea that Black lives should matter across institutions, I would have said, wow, that's an ambitious dream, man, but keep dreaming, that's great. And here we are, right? And we are here both because of the ugliness of one man's knee on another man's neck, and the way in which the body politic as a system has responded. And so our work at Citizen University is really trying to figure out, in terms of deep fixes, how do we convert moments like this into sustained, durable change, right? These waves of moral convulsion and passion that arise from the kind of depth of kind of unconscionable injustice that you see in something like the murder of George Floyd. How do we convert that into structural change? Well, that requires a couple of things, very, very broadly speaking, that we work on at Citizen University. One is just literacy in power. You know, I love what Priti was saying just about breaking down the systems of how drugs come to market or don't, who pays and who pays twice. Because we as consumers of drugs, for instance, just, you know, think about the experience of paying for them and taking them or not, right? Yeah. And we don't unpack the systems of power that precede that. Well, in every domain, whether it's drugs and medicine, whether it's education, whether it's policing, whether it's housing, there are similar invisible systems of power, maps and maps of how money, ideas, people power, force flow to give us the world that we have. And for the most part, most people, most of the time, are willfully illiterate in power. And so a lot of our programs are about teaching power and breaking it down and democratizing understanding of it in a way that is very community-based and grounded in the history and the lives of people where they live. But the second half of this, that is coupled with the literacy and power, is about grounding folks in a sense of civic character. And again, I think the moment that we're living in is a vivid display of a kind of, in the positive sense, a mass contagion of civic character, a mass awakening of shared conscience, collective conscience in our country. And that comes not only in big moments of protest that are visible through the media, but that comes in circles after circles after circles of reckoning and conversation about what do I owe my fellow human, about what do what's my part in actually making this country live up to its beautiful, wonderful, still aspirational creed, right? And so a big body of our work at Citizen University is about what you might think of as civic religion, about actually cultivating this faith. And we have programs like Civic Saturday, which are gatherings that are a civic analog to faith gatherings. Civic Seminary, which trains people from communities all over the United States to lead these gatherings. Civic Confirmation, which is, again, to extend the metaphor, a program of moral and spiritual formation for young people in civic life, right? And we really do believe that when it gets down to your question, Simon, of deep fixes, it's the last thing I'll say. I mean, I think, you know, our fundamental worldview is that, you know, we work on culture because we believe that culture is the deepest fix. We believe that culture is, to put it another way, upstream of policy and politics. I've spent a lot of my life and career working in policy and politics, and I know that machinery of power. And I've made this choice to focus on this work now because I think norms, values, narratives, behaviors, habits, rituals, the ways we either see ourselves in each other, see ourselves as woven into a common project and purpose or not. All of that frames what is or isn't possible in elections and policy. And so I think one of the beautiful things about even just four of us here is how we're all touching different parts of this equation of power plus character equaling citizenship. And we're all really bringing to bear different angles of solution, but I think getting at the same thing.
Beautiful. Well, thank you, Eric. Welcome to the conversation. There's so many ways that this connects to Priti, as you've discovered, but I'm already seeing how Ronnie and Stephen's work is teed up so beautifully. I'm going to pass to Stephen, though. You know, Stephen, you're joining us from Portland, Oregon, where you lead is not the Immigration Law Lab. We got the name wrong. You'll correct us. But you work to convene an assembly of lawyers, organizers, and tech innovators to inject more humanity into our current immigration and asylum seeking systems, and really reimagine what they should look like. I'll stop. We first met in DC, and you shared a story that also took place in DC, which was the moment where you realized just how big this system of immigrant detention, a piece of that bigger system, was. And in that moment, as I remember the story, realized you had to do something about it. We'll get to you doing something about it, but just help us understand what is the current state of immigration or seeking asylum in this country. And what are the problems that need to be addressed?
Great. Thank you for that, Simon. And I want to just acknowledge Ashoka, and I also want to acknowledge Ronnie, Eric, and Priti for just the amazing work that listening to the conversation and thinking about power, because like financial power, like the power of culture and the power of access to medicine, or the power of the patent or monopoly, right? And the work that, we talk about an immigration system, right? It's a very common thing, the immigration system's broken. And it's broken because it's actually, I don't think it's an immigration system anymore. We've actually set up a mass incarceration and deportation system. That's actually where, that's where the power lies. And there's, when we think about power, or at least when I conceptualize power, right? So we have the power flows through relationships, right? So it's the private prisons that detain people on a mass basis. So people who are seeking asylum, people who are seeking family reunification, people who've lived and part of this community are part of this community, right? And then the government seeks to use their power to deport them. And then the law, we can go to the law, right? And we look at the law, and the law might say, well, that person should not be deported. In fact, the deportation process should not be used. And we can go to court, but we would still end up losing. Or that person should get asylum, and we would go to court and we would lose, not because the law's wrong, right? There's actually a lot of immorality and injustice written in the law, but more often than not, we lose because of power. So we get the law, the law's right, and our facts are good, but we just didn't have the power. And the work that we do, we talk about building power, and it can sometimes feel very ephemeral, right? But the power in the deportation system rests with the private prison industry, and it rests with sort of what I would call, it rests with the government in an unhealthy way. So it's very disconnected from the communities the law is intended to serve. And so there's some of the things that we think about when we try to solve this problem is actually to find inflection points where we can actually target very specific interventions, and then use our technology and our engineers. So lawyers, I'm a lawyer, we're just a tool, and we use codes, like coders, and we use organizers to quickly scale so we can actually focus at a particular point and kind of blow that open. And kind of I think Priti was talking about, taking down the system. And because I think you would need to, because the system we have right now it's a mass incarceration deportation system. And what we really need is a human-centered immigration system.
And Stephen, just I love this, there's so much detail in your work. Give us a little bit of it. So there's a ground team. You have tens of thousands of lawyers who are volunteering, who are plugging into being part of the solution, and they can join a ground team that does casework, represents folks in person, but there's also remote teams that have atomized, is that the word you use, the legal process, and are figuring out how to equip their ground teams to really represent, and in that way, balance the power or begin to address the power imbalance. Is that right?
That's right. And you don't have to be a lawyer to participate, right? So
Okay.
Lawyers, we go to law school, we get the special degree, and then we wrote the rules. So then we go to take the bar exam. So we kind of wrote the rules to give ourselves our own sense of power. We do need lawyers in the system because that's the way the rules are written, but we can also disaggregate what the lawyers do. And so then we can actually distribute it into this cloud sort of way. So others, smart, good, compassionate, passionate people can participate. And then we reassemble that work and then put it on the ground where resources are less, where there's fewer resources. And then that's where sort of the inflection point is. The image in my head, and this may be dating me and I don't know, but it's the Star Wars when you're blowing up the Death Star, and there's that one sort of, the blueprint. And so you're actually going to be dropping that little thing, that little laser, whatever, in that weakness. That's kind of what we do. We find that spot, we build a big system around it, and then aim.
Beautiful. I'm going to put Ronnie on the spot now. Appreciate Stephen. Use the word blueprint. Eric used the word plan. You're on the hook to somehow tell us that you also have a plan or a blueprint. We'll get there. First, I just want to welcome you. Ronnie leads Onward, joins us from DC. Ronnie, something that I think your work addresses is the fact that millions of Americans are working full-time and not making ends meet, right? And not saving and crippled by debt. That's something that just cries out for a deep fix. Again, the theme of the conversation. And here you are, right? You have something that you're it's the, I'm gonna not be able to do the Death Star metaphor, but you've identified a spot where we can intervene. Could you tell us a little bit about your work and that point of intervention here?
Sure. And before I start, it is such an honor to be with this group and to be a part of the Ashoka family. Just even recognizing parallels on this call and ways of connecting just on this call alone makes me excited for engagement with the rest of the network. So thank you all for the opportunity. Once again, my name is Ronnie Washington. I'm the founder and CEO of Onward Financial. And our whole mission is to provide the tools for every worker to build a financial cushion. And my gosh, like in the midst of what's going on with the pandemic, obviously social upheaval, our work is at the forefront and has never felt more critical, and the why has never felt more deep than this moment right now. Our model is such that we partner with employers, typically small to medium-sized businesses, to offer a different take on how to help people build up emergency savings, how to understand how the financial system works, and how to better engage with it, and also how to avoid payday loans and other high-cost credit. We offer a package of services ranging from payroll-linked savings to financial education, nowadays also focused on how to navigate COVID resources that are available, as well as providing an alternative to, once again, payday loans in a low-cost, affordable way. The way we think about our model is very much, we want to essentially mimic what the 401k does for retirement savings. We want to make that possible for emergency savings, giving people an easy and effortless way to build an on-ramp of better financial behavior, begin to build up their emergency savings, as well as to have a layer of protection in case of job loss, in case of things like what we're experiencing right now. But more commonly, even a car breakdown or an unexpected bill has thrown people's world upside down far too often. And I think that's only exacerbated by, what we're experiencing right now. So our whole aim is to provide the tools and the resources for both the employers to support their workers, as well as for the employees to be empowered to establish this level of financial security, both here and now, but also at the end of this crisis to be in a better position to build a life or to repair their life, I would say, from a financial standpoint.
Yeah, it's beautiful work, and I know that has deep roots in the middle of the country in Kansas City, and is really, I mean, you're in a moment now where the demand it's always there, but it's the call for that, for more support and resources here is loud, right? One quick question: how have you pivoted or risen to meet that increased demand in this moment of real fragility, right?
Yeah, I would say none of us could have predicted the scale at which COVID-19 would have affected the world, right? The economy has essentially stopped, and many of the workers that have been affected are the ones that we serve. These are folks that are low to moderate income workers. We deal with manufacturing, construction, healthcare, many of which are essential workers as well. And we've essentially pivoted in the sense that we want to make sure that people have an answer to, what do I do now, right? So we've actually partnered with another nonprofit, Neighborhood Trust, to offer coaching services. So questions like, oh, my loans are now in forbearance, what does that mean? Or, oh, I'm getting a cut in my hours or in my pay, how can I manage my finances? Folks have to answer that question first before they can address or build confidence enough to begin to save and to begin to build up this larger cushion over time. So our goal is to bring these resources kind of in one trusted service with the stamp of the approval by employers, but also reaching out more directly to provide these services that answer the question of, what do I do now and what comes after, right? What comes after COVID-19, and when I'm back to work, how can I structure my financial life such that something this deep and as painful as this has been will never happen again, whether it be this scale or something as simple as a $400 expense.
Beautiful. Well, thank you, Ronnie. Now we're all here. This question of deep fixes, it assumes that we're not just throwing out the systems that we're tackling, have some sort of redemptive quality, right? Or that we have hope that can be fixed. I know, actually, I mean, Priti, this is something we've talked about, and everyone here has acknowledged their eagerness to engage with the network. This is something that, you know, folks struggle with, frankly, right? Like, how do we strike a balance between fixing these systems that are so broken, or just calling it a day and moving on to something where your creative energy and talent might be more welcome, right? And so I don't know that we have answers, but it's something I've just seen many fellows discuss and struggle with. So maybe it's a too big of a question, but how are you all navigating? How are you doing with this particular challenge of having decided to go deep and to fix, right? Versus just abandon what might, you know, well, Priti, take Mike, or Eric, rescue me.
Priti may have something. Did you want to jump in first, Priti?
Sure. I've been thinking about this a lot, actually, because if you talked to me up until 2 weeks ago, I was very clearly in there's a lot we can do to go deep and try, because we haven't tried to fix some of these structures yet. And I think, like many of us, the last 2 weeks have me sitting in a moment of deep contemplation to say, are we actually being honest? Like, do we need to reimagine from scratch? Because so many of these systems have been built on oppression and on injustice in ways that they're so embedded at this point. I don't know that I believe that we can roll them back anymore. And maybe this moment is just allowing us some time to be contemplative and maybe be more honest about that. I will say that to the extent that we are planning to go in deep to fix in the existing system right now, and Eric, you touched on this, I think this idea of democratization is very, very important to lift up, because it seems to me the thread, as I listen to each of you talk, is that what we're all trying to do fundamentally is shift power and agency back to people. And so in our system, you know, the patent system, which we're looking at, and the access to medicine system writ large, there is no power anymore for people. As a patient in America, I'm not a consumer. I have absolutely no agency in the marketplace to affect what's happening. And the patent office itself is not tasked with serving people. It is tasked with promoting innovation, which means serving patent holders and private interests. And so I think the thing I've been thinking about the most in the last 2 weeks is that it's really time for us to rethink this notion of expertise. For me, that lies at the heart of it. Who's in capital cities of countries, who has a seat at the table to inform policymaking and systems change, and all of the barriers that have been erected in between everyday people and the systems that govern their lives have gotten so, have taken on such magnitude and power that if we are going to go in for deep fixes, this is what we have to try across the board, across all these systems. And then maybe if it doesn't work, that's when we're going to say, okay, time to burn it down.
Mm-hmm. You know, I really appreciate that way of framing things, and not only as to the specific issue of you know, pharmaceuticals and medicine, but I think across these systems, you know, in the context of democracy work and you know, our efforts at Citizen University, you know, within the United States, there is, you know, one system which is our constitutional scheme and system, and it creates certain opportunities and it has certain limitations. But it's been kind of overlaid on top of that is a system that is, broadly speaking, cultural. That's very dominated today by the marketplace and market valuations of human worth and human identity and everything. But it's not only the marketplace, right? There have been times, pretty much every punctuated moment in American history, where things did change, and you can debate whether they were deep enough changes, but Abolition was a pretty deep change. Women's suffrage was a pretty deep change. The civil rights movement was a pretty deep change. And when you look at each of these punctuated periods, and I think we're living in one right now, another great civic awakening in the life of our country, what happens in these times is that the critical mass of culture shifts away from hyper-individualistic market thinking to a sense of mutual responsibility and a sense of time horizon that is not just about immediate gratification. It's about obligation to the future. It's about trying to deliver on a bigger idea than just myself and my needs. And one of the things that we are seeing right now, and it's not just actually in the demonstrations and protest waves all across the land for racial justice, but if you look at the last decade or so, everything from Occupy Wall Street and the Fight for 15 to the Tea Party and the rise of populist nationalists on the right, all of these are expressions of the same thing, which Priti was describing, which is this sense of distance and disempowerment between ordinary, everyday people and the systems that actually determine our sense of agency, opportunity, and voice. And that's not to create moral equivalency between some of these bottom-up movements, but it is to say that they are all part of a great pushback right now, right? And I think American history teaches us that if we feed into those moments of great pushback and in fact democratize an understanding of, okay, beyond that initial push, what do you do to re-rig the system of detention and mass incarceration that dresses itself up as an immigration system? What do you do to re-rig the ways in which marketplace and law combine to limit access to life-saving medications? What do we do to stop accepting as normal the idea that that a giant critical mass of Americans can't muster up the $400 in emergency savings and expenses? That is a moment right now where we can actually shift the system. And the beauty of our system, both the constitutional side and the cultural side, is that it is designed for regeneration. I think the regeneration doesn't happen often enough, but it is designed for that possibility. If we show up, if we at scale actually democratize understanding of power. And we're doing something kind of unprecedented, and we haven't yet figured out how to do it, and that is to make a mass multiracial democratic republic work for everybody. Just hasn't been done in human history. And so it is hard, but our ability to accelerate the possibility of it, especially in a time like right now, goes to the work that all my fellow fellows are doing right now to democratize understanding of how these systems work and how you can re-rig them and create a culture of participation, not spectatordom.
I've only heard of systems that are rigged as like bad, but I'm loving the re-rig, like this language you're using. I mean, so much of the language you all are using is just really evocative for me. But Stephen, I noticed you went off mute. So does that mean you're gonna jump in here?
Yeah, I totally want to jump in. Totally love both what Priti and Eric you were saying. For the immigration power, the deportation power actually exists in theory as an extra constitutional power. So it actually, in theory, right, exists outside the Constitution. And that it's actually inherent power, I think, an inherently oppressive and racist power. And so when you say deep fixes, in my mind, we go deep, we uproot it, we rip it out, and we let it wither. And I think that is the solution, is actually to end the deportation process, because I don't think there's any valid public policy reason for deportation other than to perpetuate expulsion and exclusion and otherization. So when we talk about deep fixes, I actually do think it is actually going deep to uproot. And then reimagining the human-centered aspect, right? So reimagining, right? And I don't even know if we need to reimagine. We could just imagine, right? I think we all imagine that. And it is thinking too about if you end that, right? Which is our system of government allows us to reinvent, right? Which is cool. So we can regenerate. So we can actually do this. We we've had the really unique opportunity in this COVID moment to actually build a system around disaster relief. And we talk about it as it is our system. It succeeds or not based on us. We have no one, the system was not designed to help the people we're trying to help. In fact, so we can't say that it failed because it wasn't designed. So we actually got to design the system, imbue our values, imbue the work that we're doing. And it works or not because of us. And it's actually hard. It might be easy to kind of like blow it up. It is actually kind of hard also to like rebuild a system. So yeah, but it's possible, right?
Yeah, so helpful to hear it from you, Stephen, on this point. Ronnie, are you? Where is your mind? Like, what is this bringing up for you?
Yeah, the human-centeredness of it all. Like, I love your point around like who is the system built to, in favor of, and reimagining what that means. I'm obviously coming from like the financial sector, which is, my gosh, like a prime example of resources being concentrated, products being designed, services being offered to a subset, whereas there's so much opportunity to meet folks where they are, to address their real needs on a day-to-day basis. And in terms of where I think like we fit, I think it's like, it's not just us or one organization. I think there needs to be multiple models out there, right? Like us proving an example of how these new systems can be recreated or redesigned through testing and learning. And I feel like probably the Ashoka network as a whole, like, lifts up these models and lifts up entrepreneurs to prove out different ways that, society can operate. So for us, it's like one of many, in hopes that, where we succeed, like we can build on that, and where we fail, others learn, so that ultimately like the financial sector and how we engage and how we empower folks for greater financial security can ultimately change at the end of the day. But once again, not just one, it has to be many, and models more than anything.
Ronnie, I want to pick up on something you're saying. Yes, the Ashoka community definitely lifts up changemakers and entrepreneurs. Something that we see is that people oftentimes see entrepreneurs as risk takers, right? You're taking huge risks. What we appreciate is that it's when you really look at the work you're doing, you've understood the anthropology, the dynamics of the system so deeply that yes, what you're doing is huge, it's hard, but it doesn't, and I won't speak for you, but it doesn't always come across as a risk, right? Like, and we partner with you, not because we're also Ashoka taking a huge risk on you all, but because we believe that your diagnosis of the system, these opportunities, Priti, yes, the ability for everyone to be powerful and part of the solution, de-risks and makes inevitable, not easy, not immediate, but inevitable, the work, the solution, the better future that you all are championing. And so if we, maybe in these 38 minutes, we've gotten everybody listening in to that point of understanding that, yeah, these aren't risky propositions, this is inevitable. Assuming we didn't, we still have some skeptics. I'd love to hear from you all, like what should we, like what other patterns, trends, forces are, should we take comfort in? Should we be encouraged by that further de-risk, if again, this still feels risky, the solutions that you're bringing? What winds are at our back that we might be, we should all appreciate?
Yeah.
And this might be our last question from me, just given time. So if anybody else listening wants to type in a question, if there's time, here, we can possibly get to one or two of those. But Simon, before that,
if I could jump in, and I've been seeing some of the questions that have been posted in Q&A, and maybe speak to the aspects of some of them by way of answering yours. I think one of the things that, and this picks up on what Ronnie was saying, the power of the Ashoka community and network is not only in lifting up our work, and not only in reminding us and others outside that there is no single solution, that this does take an ecosystem and everybody holding up their corner and everybody figuring out ways to learn from each other in that. And I think there's another dimension that is also true for how we de-risk the feeling of getting more people involved in this democratization of power work. And that is to stop, to fundamentally get people to remember they are not alone. I think on almost all the things we're talking about, immigration, financial challenges, health challenges, the systems not only oppress people, but they make people feel completely isolated and individualized and atomized in a way where, and so the simple act, of joining others, organizing with others, generates new power out of thin air. And again, we see that all around us today on the streets and in various halls of power in the United States. But I think the other piece, apart from simply reaching out and building collective power in something as small as a club or a working group or a citizens group of change makers, whatever it might be, the other piece is shifting our idea of what self-interest is. And I think this is really important, and Ashoka is an embodiment of this. True self-interest is mutual interest. And we've got to remind people of that, not by saying it, but by giving them opportunities to practice it. And so one of the things we do at Citizen University are these mutual aid circles that we call civic collaboratory, where people come together, and it's sort of modeled off the lending circles that you see in immigrant communities today, that you've seen in, it's as old as emancipation in the United States. People who do not have capital coming together to pool together their capital and then taking turns sharing the pot, right? And we do that not really with money capital, but with the kinds of capital that we're all talking about today: ideas capital, relationship capital, knowledge capital, institutional capital, of ways to support each other, right? And those simple habits of mutual aid will make it feel less risky for everybody to try to change the system, will make you feel less alone in trying to take apart and blow up, to realize, oh, it's not just me who has to come up with the Death Star plan. Like, there's a bunch of us, and if we mutually aid one another, we can get there.
Yeah, absolutely. Can I tag on to Eric and just say that I completely agree. I think so much of the root cause across systems right now in our world is the idea of proximity, being individualistic versus who are you in relationship with. And so even just taking, our next chapter as an example, as we move to think about what the access to medicine system and what the patent system in particular is going to look like, a big part of what we want to do is figure out, how do we build proximity? How are we bringing people who are closest to the system, patent examiners or law firms or small corporations? How are we bringing individuals from those spaces together with people who are most affected, whether that is patients, whether that is people who are incarcerated and can't get their medicines, whether that is advocates, and together with policymakers? And how does that conversation change the level of risk that people feel about moving forward to evolve the system for the better?
Thank you, Priti. So this is a theme, that we've picked up, with this idea that, working together and not necessarily taking it all on alone, right? That's very much the same. That's part of it, right? That that when I have an insight and when my proximity to an issue and my solution, is best, and the time for Ronnie, Stephen, Priti to lean in, and for me to support. You folks were at time. These things fly by. It was just such a beautiful conversation. I want to acknowledge that there are some questions that we didn't get to. There's so many things we could have talked about that we didn't have time for. The lucky thing for Ronnie, Stephen, Priti, and Eric is that they'll have the rest of their working lives to stay connected and synced up and to discuss these things. For everyone who is joining this of generosity and in celebrating these and supporting these social entrepreneurs, if you have ideas or questions or leads to resources or connections, you can share those with the folks who've been emailing you links to join this conversation, and we will make sure that Ronnie, Stephen, Priti, and Eric see those. Thank you for our speakers, our fellows here, for sharing your time and your talent with all of us. And everyone, it was a wonderful way to spend some of our time together this afternoon. There will be more inside Ashoka's, our website has all of our upcoming events and opportunities to stay connected with each other and with our Ashoka Fellows. So thank you all so much. Yeah, I get the last word, I guess. So much appreciation for you all and for all you do.
Thank you. I can't wait to connect with just the folks in this gathering.
I know. Yeah, real talk when our audience leaves. No, you guys, this is great. It was really, I mean, I think we speak so powerfully to this really hard but beautiful, beautiful work happening.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
All right. You well. Thanks all.